It was early afternoon on January 2nd, 1935, at the Hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri. A man walked into the hotel and proceeded to check in. The man was in his mid-20s to mid-30s. He was well dressed and wore a black overcoat. The man had a scar on his temple that traveled down to his ear. He had brown hair and a cauliflower ear. The staff thought that he might have been a boxer or a wrestler. The man gave the name Roland T Owen. He had no luggage with him. He asked for a room on one of the upper floors in the interior of the building. While he was filling out the form to check into the hotel, under the address section he just wrote down Los Angeles. The Hotel President was built in the Roaring '20s, a time in America when construction was everywhere. We were a powerful nation after the Great War, and our economy was booming. But in 1929, the Great Depression struck America, and then the rest of the world. Roland T Owen was given the key to his room, 1046. He paid for just one night up front. The bellboy, Randolph Probst, guided Roland to the elevator, and then selected the 10th floor. During the journey to room 1046, Roland told the bellboy that he stayed at the Muehlebach Hotel the night before, but he thought the $5 a night price tag was far too high. $5 in 1935 equals about $115 today. That is the reason why he found himself at the Hotel President. The bellboy stopped at room 1046, then opened the door for his guest to enter. He then witnessed Roland take out toothpaste, a comb, and a hairbrush out of his pocket. He put them on the sink, and then he gave Roland the key and exited the room. A short time later, the bellboy saw Roland leave the hotel. Mary Soptic was a maid for the hotel. She made her rounds cleaning the rooms. The afternoon of the 2nd, she reached room 1046. Mary entered the room and saw Roland in the room. She apologized, but Roland told her it was okay, and that she could enter and clean the room. He had the shades drawn down over the windows, and he had one lamp dimly lit. While she was cleaning the room, Roland got up to leave, but he told her not to lock the door, because he was expecting a friend to arrive shortly. He went to get ready and reminded her one more time before he left the room. She did as he told and left the door unlocked. She later told the police that he was either worried about something or afraid. At 4 p.m., she returned to room 1046 with fresh, clean towels. The door was unlocked. She saw Roland laying on the bed. The room was dark, but she could see that he was fully dressed from the light on the hallway. She also saw a note on the end table. It read, "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The morning of January 3rd, 10:30 a.m., Mary was again doing her morning cleaning. She reached room 1046. The door was locked this time from the outside, so she believed the man from room 1046 was out. At this hotel, you could lock the door from either the inside, which the hotel staff could only open with a master key, or from the outside. The maids and hotel staff could open the door with their regular keys if it was locked from the outside, but not the inside. But when she unlocked and entered the room, she saw Roland laying on the bed in the same spot she had seen him the day before, still sitting in the dark, fully clothed, meaning that somebody had locked Roland in the room and left with the key, since her last visit the day prior. While Mary was cleaning, the phone rang. Roland answered it. She overheard Roland say, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry, I just had breakfast." After a short pause, "No, I'm not hungry." After the phone call, Roland started a conversation with Mary. He asked her about her job, if she cleaned the entire floor, and if the President Hotel had any residential rooms. He also complained about the price of his stay at the Muehlebach Hotel, just as he had told the bellboy Randolph Probst. She then finished cleaning the room, gathered the towels, and moved on to finish her work for the day. At 4 p.m., Mary returned at room 1046 with the towels cleaned. She could hear two men talking inside, so she decided to knock on the door first. A man with a deep voice asked, "Who is it?" Mary did not believe this man was Roland. She told the man that she had clean towels. The man answered, "We don't need any." Mary had taken all of the towels from the room earlier when she was cleaning, so she knew that there was no towels inside. She did not press the matter any further and decided to move on to the next room. The information we are about to go over happened on the night of the 3rd. It may or may not have something to do with the events that happened the next morning. No one knows for sure if any of these events have any relevance to Roland in room 1046. Jean Owen checked into the hotel that night, and she was given a room next to Roland. She later claimed that she was feeling sick and didn't want to make the trip back to Lee's Summit. Her boyfriend decided to come see her for a few hours. He arrived at 9:20 p.m. She claimed to hear voices on floor 10, male and female, using profanity and speaking loudly. The elevator operator, Charles Blocher, started his shift at midnight. The elevator had an operator to take people to their desired floor. It wasn't fully automated like it is today. He later told police that there had been a loud party on the 10th floor that night in room 1055. He also reported a woman who had been seen at the hotel before visiting men in their hotel rooms. Many employees believed she was a sex worker. They referred to her as a commercial woman. She entered the elevator and wanted to be taken to the 10th floor. She asked Charles where room 1026 was and then headed over. After just 5 minutes, the elevator was called back up to the 10th floor. It was the same woman. She explained that her client did not answer the door and that this client had never not been in the room before. She said he might be in room 1024 since she saw a light on and decided to stay on the 10th floor. Charles took the elevator back down to the lobby, and after just half an hour, he got a call back up to the 10th floor by the same woman. He then took her down to the lobby. 1 hour later, she returned with a man and was taken to the 9th floor by Charles. At 4:15, he returned to the 9th floor. It was the woman. He took her to the lobby. She then left the hotel. At 4:30, the man that went up to the 9th floor with the woman called for the elevator. He claimed he couldn't sleep and wanted to take a walk. He was taken down to the lobby. At 11 p.m. on the 3rd, a city worker, Robert Lane, was driving and spotted a man underdressed for the winter. He had shoes, pants, and an undershirt on. The man waved him down and looked his car over, then apologized, saying, "Sorry, I thought it was a taxi." He asked Robert if he could take him to somewhere where he could catch a cab from. Robert agreed. He noticed the man had blood on him, and he said, "You look as if you've been in it bad." The man replied that either he would kill him tomorrow or he would kill someone else tomorrow. Robert watched the man through the rear view mirror. He had a deep scratch down his arm and he was cupping his hands like he was catching blood from a deeper wound. Robert found a taxi and dropped the man off. He walked over to the taxi and honked the horn. The taxi cab driver came out from a nearby restaurant towards his cab as Robert drove off. The shift change for the switchboard operator was at 7 a.m. on January 4th at the President Hotel. Roland had requested a wake-up call that morning. When the operator went to make the call, she saw a light for room 1046 was on, meaning that the phone was off the hook. She waited a short time, but the light was still on. The bellboy, Randolph Probst, who had walked Roland to his room just 2 days earlier, was told to go up to room 1046 and hang up the phone. When he reached room 1046, the Do Not Disturb sign was hanging on the doorknob. He knocked on the door. He heard a voice tell him to come in, but the door was locked, and he did not bring his key. He knocked again. The voice yelled back to turn on the light. Randolph figured that Roland was just drunk and yelled at him to hang up the phone. He then headed back down and explained the situation. At 8:30, the phone was still off the hook. A different bellboy, Harold Pike, was sent this time to deal with room 1046, and he remembered his key. The Do Not Disturb sign was still on the door, but he opened the door and went inside. He saw Roland laying on the bed, completely nude. He averted his eyes, but he noticed some dark stains on the sheets. He had walked over and hung up the phone. He figured Roland was just drunk, and he then left the room. After 2 hours, the phone in room 1046 was knocked over for a second time, illuminating the light once again. The bellboy, Randolph Probst, was sent again, and he brought his key this time. He knocked again, but with no response. He ignored the Do Not Disturb sign and entered the room. He saw Roland laying on the floor in front of the door, just a few feet away, naked, with his knees and elbows on the floor, with his hands on top of his bloodied head. He saw the blood on the walls, the bed, and the bathroom. He went over, hung up the phone, and quickly left the room. He went to the manager to get help. The pair returned to the room, but could not get the door open this time. Roland fell over. He blocked the door from opening more than just a few inches. Eventually, Roland was able to get up, and the two entered the room. Roland went and sat on the tub, laying his head on the sink. The manager went and called the police and a doctor. Roland had been tied up. He had cord wrapped around his wrists, his ankles, and his neck. It appeared somebody had tortured him. There was bruising around his neck as well, like he was strangled. There was blood on the walls, on the floor, the bed, the ceiling. The room was completely covered in Roland's blood. He had a fractured skull on the right side. He had been stabbed multiple times in the chest, above the heart. One had even punctured his lung. There were detectives present, along with Dr. Flanders. He cut the restraints from his wrists and asked Roland, "Who did this to you?" Roland replied, "No one." Dr. Flanders then asked, "How did you get hurt?" Roland replied that he fell and he hit the bathtub. Dr. Flanders asked if he was trying to end his own life. Roland responded, no. Roland was barely conscious at this point. He even tried to start up a bath, but Dr. Flanders stopped him. He soon passed out and he was taken to the hospital. He fell into a coma before they reached the hospital, but he was alive for now. The police investigated the hotel room. They found no murder weapon. All of Roland's belongings were gone. All of his clothes, his comb, his hairbrush, and his toothpaste. The only evidence they found belonging to Roland was a tag that was ripped from his tie. All of the items provided by the hotel were missing also. The soap, the shampoo, the towels. We know that when Mary tried to bring the towels to room 1046 the night before, she was turned away. Dr. Flanders believed Roland's injuries happened sometime between 4 to 5 a.m. They ruled out that Roland tried to end his life since there was no weapons in the room. Also, Roland had been tied up and restrained. Roland succumbed to his injuries just after midnight on January 5th. The police were now dealing with a murder investigation. The investigators found more items inside the room, but they were not Roland's. A hairpin, safety pin, an unsmoked cigarette, a full bottle of diluted sulfuric acid. This could have been brought for a torture item. One of the glasses was broken in the sink, and a piece of glass was missing. The detectives found fingerprints. They believed they belonged to a woman due to their size. They did not match anyone who worked for the hotel or Roland. They realized that Roland T Owen was an alias after trying to contact the LAPD to find the next of kin. The police asked the press for help. The story spread across Kansas City, and then it would become national news. At first, they believed the case was solved when a man claimed that John Doe from room 1046 was his cousin. But the deceased man's sister said her brother had died 5 years earlier, even though the two were strikingly similar. A wrestling promoter also came to police, claiming that the man came to him to join some wrestling matches in 1934. He gave the name Cecil Werner, and gave the name of another promoter he worked for in Omaha. But the promoter in Omaha had never heard of Cecil Werner, and he did not recognize the man from room 1046. After a week, the case began to fall from public attention, and less leads came in. The body of the man from room 1046 had been kept at the local funeral home. Newspapers reported that the man would be buried in a potter's field the next day. A potter's field, or a pauper's grave, is where unknown or unclaimed people get buried. That same day, the funeral home received a phone call from a man who asked for the funeral to be delayed so that he can send money for a proper burial. Across the river in Kansas City, Kansas, at Memorial Park Cemetery, so that the man could be buried by his sister. The funeral home said that they would have to tell the police, but the caller did not care. The caller claimed that Roland had an affair while he was engaged with another woman. The caller and two women had arranged for a meeting at the hotel to get revenge, saying that cheaters usually get what's coming to them. Just like the caller said, $25 wrapped in newspaper arrived to pay for the funeral arrangements. A flower shop also received a card with money for 13 American Beauty roses to be sent with the coffin. The card said, "Love forever, Luis." The funeral was not advertised, so the only people who knew were the ones who arranged the funeral and the police. The police were the only one present at the funeral. The police also disguised themselves as grave diggers and watched the grave for a few days after the funeral to see if anybody would visit the grave. No one showed up. A woman called the newspaper who reported the burial in the potter's field and said that the story was incorrect. He had been given a proper burial and that the floral shop and funeral home could verify this. The newspaper asked who she was, and she replied, "Never mind, I know what I'm talking about." When they asked why he was killed, she replied, "He got into a jam." The photo of the man from room 1046 would spread across America, eventually reaching a friend of Ruby Ogletree, who recognized the man as her friend's son. She showed Ruby the article with his photo. She agreed. The man in the photo looked just like her son, Artemis Ogletree. She called the police in Kansas City and provided enough detail to prove that the man in room 1046 was indeed her son, Artemis Ogletree. He had finally been identified, but everyone had his age wrong. Artemis was actually just 17 years old. He had hitchhiked to California in 1934. She had received letters from her son after he left California, but after his death, she kept getting letters. Only now, they were typed instead of handwritten. She claimed her son did not know how to type, although it's not very hard to type a letter, even on a typewriter in the 1930s. She became suspicious of the letters. One letter claimed that he was going to Europe. This letter was sent from New York. She got a phone call from a man claiming Artemis saved his life in a fight, but Artemis was now in Cairo. He now had a wife, and he was doing well, but he could not write due to the fact that he lost a thumb in the fight that saved the man's life. She said that this man spoke wild and irrational. No evidence exists that Artemis ever made his way to Europe or to Cairo. John Horner, in 2003 or 4, was working in the Kansas City Public Library. He received a call from someone who was out of state. They found a shoebox with newspaper clippings from Artemis's death and one item claimed in the newspapers. The caller found it while he was cleaning out belongings from an elderly person who died, but did not say what the item was. Many theories exist about this case. Some believe that Artemis was involved in BDSM with the man known as Don, and things got out of hand and ended up in the death of Artemis. Due to the phone call to the funeral home, the theory that Artemis was involved in a love triangle that ended in his death with a retaliation killing is also very popular. Some people propose the name Don is linked to the Mafia, and Artemis was killed by the mob. The Mafia has been known to pay for funeral expenses on certain occasions. Others believe that the commercial woman that went to the 10th floor on the night before Artemis's attack is to blame, along with the man she went to the 9th floor with. and some believe the man the city worker picked up covered in blood was either Artemis or the mysterious Don, claiming to kill him tomorrow. This is a wild case with many twists and turns. I can't understand why Artemis sat in the room for hours next to a phone and didn't call for help, and he did not ask for help when the bellboy came to the room the first time. He just said, "Come in," and then turn on the light. He was tied up, and he had been stabbed in the chest repeatedly. He had his head fractured. This case makes no sense. The killer got away in this case and left very little evidence. Tell me what you think about this case in the comments section. Any other theories or suspects we didn't cover? I hope you enjoyed this one. It is such a strange case. And we will see you on the next one, people. Peace.